All right, hello everybody, and welcome to another Groove Along. Today we have Floral Strobe by False Noise, and I am joined by Chai.
Hello, hello. Glad to be back.
So I'm gonna, I think, start by describing what I hear in this album and what I like about this album, and then if you would just hop in with a more technical analysis when you see fit.
I haven't heard this album in a while, so I'm gonna let you do your thing first, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah. So I I found this album while looking for secret DJ albums for you, and it really scratched an itch of not sounding like anything I'd really heard before, either
Mm-hmm.
within or outside of electronic music. It has a aesthetic I'd say is that's similar to like late 90s early 2000s computer core, and in a very abstract sense, like the antagonist from the System Shock games.
I'm not familiar with those games, unfortunately.
Okay, well, it's like it's an evil AI, but it's
Okay.
like this just feels like evil AI music to me in that there's a absolutely synthetic element to it, but it also sounds a bit organic in how it's applied.
I think I see where you're coming from. You're
I
talking about
liked,
more so the atmospheric nature of it, the sort of you can call it dystopian. That's a word that people like to use with music a lot.
yeah, definitely
Um,
dystopian, and I
yeah.
think it's never overwhelmingly aggressive, but at the same time, it's not like a gentle listen. That's definitely not a word I'd use for it.
Right, and we were talking about this sort of in our last groove along in the sense of what is danceability versus listenability.
Mm-hmm.
Like I kind of said that it wasn't really something that you can make a huge distinction of, but in this case, I'd say that this is very much a listening album. Like I couldn't imagine sort of going to a club or whatever, a rave, and hearing this playing sort of smoothly within the context of a set. Um, because obviously you're not going to play all these album songs just like in a row as an album on a dance floor. That's just not what happens. So that was the first thing that kind of struck me when I first heard this album years ago. That it was described to me as drum and bass because it was described to me as neurofunk, which is a subgenre of drum and bass. But when I listened to it, I can't say that's really the vibe I got. Like what you described it as is perfectly accurate. The I'm not exactly sure what you mean by computer core. Um, I can take it to mean that judging by the context of the time you were talking about, the switch from analog production to digital production, that was the real change that was happening then. And so there were a lot of new sounds, a lot of new possibilities that were just entering the mainstream zeitgeist of music. And people were really experimenting. And that sort of experimentation, I think, is sort of what you were describing. I think it's
Um,
great, personally. Like, there are plenty of albums from around that time, plenty of artists who really emerged during that time who took the world by storm. Um, for example, within the genre drum and bass, we have like Pendulum. They really revolutionized digital production, and while they're obviously a lot more sort of, they come from a more musical background, like a band style background. They still use a lot of sort of glitchy digital sounds that weren't really possible before.
yeah, and I will say I at least wasn't intending to be super technical when I say computer core. What I think I mean by that is it has a bit of like the sonic aesthetic that I associate with like Windows XP,
Mm-hmm.
in that
A little crunchy,
a little crunchy,
a little warm.
but yeah, exactly. I was about to say a little warm. And I'll point it out, but in the first song, pretty early on, there's just a sound that's implemented that just does warm me up in the same way that like listening to something on vinyl does.
Mm-hmm. I totally understand that. Yeah, I'm looking forward to whenever that is.
Yeah, you won't be waiting long. I think it's within like the first 30 seconds.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Then I think I just heard it then because I was using that song to check my levels. So
yeah.
I think I know what you mean now. So yeah, okay.
All right. I guess without further ado, we can get into this. So I'm going to count down three to go, and we'll go on go.
Okay, whenever you're ready.
All right, 3, 2, 1, go. And here it is.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean.
Just that crunch makes me feel so warm.
It's the reverb. A lot of reverb.
You have to. I should have checked my sound level. I have to turn this down so I can hear you.
Yeah,
There
I have
we
it
go.
turned down pretty good.
And aesthetically, I like that for an opening track, it really does sound like a startup.
Yeah, it's very the start of like 2001 Space Odyssey type music.
Yeah.
It's sort of it's a beginning. It's very clear in its intention. Okay, so we're at 170 beats per minute. Just counting it out with my finger.
Okay. I'm
Standard
glad.
drum and bass.
I'm glad you pointed that out because I would not have known.
It's just DJ instinct. It's just what every DJ will do. I like this a lot.
Good. I was gonna ask.
You know
Is
who
there?
this reminds me of?
What's that?
Oh, go ahead. It reminds me of Camo and Crooked. I know I submitted an album by them a while ago.
Mm-hmm.
They have a very stop-starty, very sort of like bass sort of envelopes the spaces between the breakbeats type of music.
Yeah, I was gonna ask if there was like a technical term for the very stuttery kind of sound.
I just call it the Camo and Crooked sound because they're the most famous drum and bass artists who use that sound on a regular basis.
Okay.
It's very polished. It's very digital, and I love it. I don't think this is a song I would have disliked when I first heard it for sure. This one's great.
I will say the rest of the album like has amazing moments, but this is another example of like the opener just being a showstopper.
Really good. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I had to turn that up for that. Oh, that was really nice.
Mm-hmm.
A little sub bass kicks.
And then very nice transition here.
There's a lot of moments to this song.
There
Stop,
is.
go, stop. I appreciate that. It really makes you stop and think about what's going on.
Mm-hmm. For as aggressive as this album can be, it does, I feel, give you a lot of time to digest it.
Yeah. Which is not really something you see a lot within this genre of dance music or this side of dance music.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's definitely trying to be electronic music rather than dance music, which, you know, fair enough.
So yeah, just a, in
You
my
want to get into
opinion,
the what's up?
just an insane opener.
Really good. I was just about to say we're getting into the album's namesake track.
It's what track?
Its namesake.
Oh yes.
You don't see that too often, where you have a song called the same thing as the album.
I feel like especially in electronic, like in rock and
Not in
pop.
electronic, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like in pop, sometimes the album gets named for its most popular song.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
This track, I like how scattered it feels.
yeah, there's definitely a lot of subtle changes throughout the synths, the beat structure.
Mm.
Um, this is a far more I'm not gonna say simplistic breakbeat, but it's the most common one in all of drum and bass music. At least it's called the Amen break. It's
Okay.
it's a
I
very like it's not that's not the right way to say it, but there's no way I can describe the break to you without like showing it to you sort of without the context of music. Um, but that's what it is for the listeners. If you're out there and you care, that's what it is.
yeah, I know the Amen break in terms of like name. I just
It's very
not
famous. It's the most famous one.
yeah, I'm not experienced enough to be able to identify it by sound.
This is no longer an Amen break, by the way. It's sort of chopped up. Um, I'd venture to say this is probably an original breakbeat. Doesn't sound like it could have been sampled, but I could be wrong.
I still like how bouncy it is.
It's very funky, but it's very hard to like keep a rhythm and dance to, I'd say.
Mm. I think this generously falls into a category of music I love that I call paint shaker music.
Yeah, why do you call it that?
Um, well, you know those paint shakers they have at hardware stores.
Uh-huh.
Feels
Yeah.
like sticking my head in one of those.
Oh, I see. That makes sense. It's a lot. It's a lot going on, hitting you from every direction.
Mm. And just
It's a funny way to describe an album, but this album is very colorful. Actually, it's a pretty common way to describe an album. Um,
you could almost say it's floral.
yeah, you could say that. He just might. It's very sort of sequenced in the sense of there's a clear start, there's a clear build up, and a clear finish to each song,
Yes.
which is obviously a very common way to, do song structure, but compared to the last album we listened to together, that's quite a shift.
Yeah, because the last one was very much, I feel, designed to flow. It was a, what's the word, mix?
It's a mix,
Yeah.
yes. But also, there are plenty of albums within that sort of like ethos genre that flow together. That sort of you can't really find a clear stopping and starting point for each song. That's more of old school, to be honest. These days, albums tend to have separation.
Yeah. This is another one of my favorite tracks off the album here.
Mm-hmm. I've had you listen to a song or album by Noisia, right?
Yes, and I remember liking it quite a bit.
Yeah. That's sort of in a similar vein, although that's more rooted in traditional drum and bass culture. And it's a little more aggressive. It's more like, I want to punch you in the face. This album's more like floral. We keep saying it, but
Mm-hmm.
that's the obvious overarching theme, right?
Yeah, and again, I do think it's interesting how, despite the aggression, it does feel gentle at points.
It doesn't feel particularly aggressive to me. I mean, the breakbeats are obviously fast
Mm.
and snappy, but the overall message of the song does not feel aggressive, especially this. This is very sort of with the singing sample in the background and
Yeah.
the chip tune like synths. Do you ever go on Who Sampled? Is that a website you've used before?
It is not, but is it like just identifying samples?
Samples within. Yep, I highly recommend it.
That
I'm
does
gonna
sound
see what they got for this album.
okay. It does sound very up my alley.
Yeah, especially for something like someone like Aphex Twin. If you go and look at like selected ambient work samples, you'll find some really cool ones. Like classical music, like classical Indian music. There's a lot of like that kind of stuff.
Okay.
Seems like they don't have Floral Strobe. That's all right. I knew this song was giving me Noisia vibes.
It was gonna be
This is the part that really sort of gives it, because it's a straight breakbeat with very chopped up samples, with a sort of like very like I don't want to say angelic, but it feels like it's streaming down from the sky. Does that make sense?
yeah. I can hear that.
But this just sounds so Noisia to me. I'm sure the producer was inspired by them.
Yeah, I don't know if they've actually put out. They've put out a few singles, but I don't think they've put out anything like EP length since this.
Yeah, no. I was just looking at his Twitter. Working on an album right now.
Oh, all right, cool. love to see it. Here, let me
Yeah, I thought that was funny.
all right, let me I can do some real-time editing here. For users, I am smirking because Chai sent this image.
Oh, you're putting it on the video.
Yeah.
Very nice, very nice. But no, it's true. Like most neurofunk albums have songs that are called like eating brain, fucking blowing shit up. Like it's just very like comical.
Yeah, and
But
like compared to Snake Monastery, which had this very like grandiose like slay the dragon kind of.
yeah, even that it's hard to take seriously,
Yeah.
isn't it?
I wouldn't call it hard to take seriously.
No, they
but
did it really well.
Yeah.
A lot of producers don't put that much effort into it. Is this song more of an interlude?
Yes. And I feel like we've gotten out of the most chaotic sequence of songs.
Mm-hmm. I wouldn't say they were overly chaotic.
I get
Approachable.
that is interesting because that is not, I guess, how I interpret the album. I feel like it is a very chaotic album.
I mean, you know, I'm a lot more used to this kind of music. I've
That
listened
is
to this
true.
my whole life. I just see other artists. I can see the influences within the songs, and that sort of like normalizes it for me. I'm like, okay, this sounds like something I've already heard, and that's a lot more mainstream, but this is an interesting interpretation of it. But there's also a genre that's like you either, from most people that I've talked to, it's like you love it or you hate it. You know, there doesn't really seem like there's an in between of like liking drum and bass jungle type music, faster music, because it's different to what you're listening to 99% of the time in like the mainstream, unless you're listening to like metal or something.
That is true.
Most music is like 120, 130 in full time, maybe 60, 64 in halftime. Like it's very different to what you're used to, and maybe that's the reaction you sort of had listening to this for the first time.
Yeah, I mean it.
You
Yeah,
liked it, obviously.
my first time, it was very much I've never heard anything like it. You know, I've heard very scatterbrained, like electronic, like Autechre and such.
Oh, cheer, yeah.
Oh, is that how you pronounce it?
Yeah.
Um, but this, I think, a lot of it for me, I think, is like the sonic aesthetic of it.
Mm-hmm.
With it's not chiptune, but it's reminiscent of.
Uh-huh. Yeah. It seems like it's actually pronounced Altekra.
Okay,
I've just been saying it how I heard someone else say it.
that's valid. That's how life be sometimes.
True. Well, now we know.
Mm-hmm. There's a section in this song. I'm trying to remember what it reminds me of.
Well, let me know when it happens.
I think it reminds me of it's a track off of Drink the Sea by
Glitch Mob.
yeah. I think it's the very gentle vocal sample here.
You're talking about this?
Mm.
You know, I think I'm finally starting to understand what this album is for.
Okay, what's that?
I think it's for coding.
Okay.
Sort of sitting, but your mind is going like 100 miles an hour.
I
And this
can
sort
hear
of matches
that.
that energy.
I can
'Cause I
definitely
know a
see
ton of
that.
people who like listening to like drum and bass and jungle for coding. And this definitely feels like it's almost made for that. Because it's stimulating,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not too stimulating. Um, it's wild, but it's also has its moments of being calm and sort of reflective, you could say.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think that's one of the primary reasons why I didn't like it when I first listened to it, because I was like, I can't dance to this. You know, like, what do you want me to do with this? It just more or less wasn't for me.
And I think that's a very fair criticism. I absolutely don't think this was made for the rave.
Traditional drum and bass
Yeah.
fans. Yeah. But this is the new era. A lot of music is now just listening by yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Just fine. But I'm more of a classical style listener in that sense. Is this one of your more like, what do you think of this song?
This one I feel is a nice interlude in that it's calm, but it's still energetic enough. It's not losing any momentum.
It still has a beat.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but it's still giving you a breather.
Yeah, that makes sense to me.
And then I feel like this song, the main thing for me is I think it's a very appropriately named song.
Yeah. Jewel Crust. Why do you say that?
Because it to me it sounds and feels like it is just raining diamonds.
Uh-huh. You hit the jackpot.
I don't know if you ever played a game called Motherload. It's like a flash game.
Oh my god, mini clip. Yeah,
Yeah.
I love that game.
It reminds
I know
me
what you
deep in
mean.
my core.
Yeah. The simpler times.
Much simpler times.
Feels like a startup sequence.
Mm-hmm.
Very warm.
This one is very warm. Crinkly is the word I would use to describe it.
Mm-hmm. Can you tell the difference though between this song and the others so far?
In terms of like BPM or something.
Yeah.
This
That was what I
feels
was thinking of, yeah.
this feels slower, but it could also just be faster, and I'm like thinking of it in halftime.
No, it's slower.
Okay.
You're sort of you got to pay attention to the main beats. Like you got to sort of ignore the synths that are happening.
Mm-hmm.
Just sort of focus on the 4x4 sequence.
Yeah. This song makes me think of this is what a computer hears when you're defragging a hard drive.
Yeah. I mean, it's a pretty ravey computer then.
Yeah.
It's what my computer hears for sure. All the music on the hard drive. Apparently, false noise is very popular within like the rhythm game community. So like, apparently Geometry Dash, they're very popular in.
That does
I think it's
not
interesting.
shock me.
Yeah. I'm not really a rhythm game guy though.
Neither am I, especially when it comes to like games like Osu. That I
No,
feel like
that's too much.
no, yeah, that would just break my brain. But
I mean, there's some that are easy. Like I was pretty good at Guitar Hero.
Oh yeah,
Beat Saber is easy because you can just stay on beat and just sort of, just keep moving your arms around.
oh yeah.
I do like DDR as well.
DDR, I was never coordinated enough for it, but I did play just a shit ton of Guitar Hero
Yeah.
when I was younger.
I love playing Rock Band on the drums. That was my favorite.
Yeah, I always stuck to the guitar, but I remember playing a little bit of drums on Rock Band.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's wet.
Very wet here. Hope Nick's listening.
The aesthetic almost, it feels like they're going for underwater.
Yeah,
The way the synths are distorted.
it's very literally dripping on the what is that? The snare.
It's the synth sort of. Oh, what are you referring to?
The thing that just sounds like a drip drop.
Oh yeah, that's just probably a hi-hat or a snare that's been filtered to really take the high ends out. So it's just you're just hearing the low end, and it's just sort of doing its thing. It's a very very interesting production for sure.
Mm.
A lot of thought was put into every second of this album, more or less.
Yeah, I'm curious to know how long it took to put this album together.
Judging by their Twitter, it seems like years. It seems like they really put a lot of they're like very perfectionist. It's a lot of cuts, lots of
Mm.
edits. It seems like it takes a long time
And it's
to
a
make
very
music, and
it's a very dense record too. Like, there's
it
always
is,
just
and
a ton going on.
I understand that sort of, because like when I like get into making music, I feel like I'm caught up too much in making it perfect. But most DJs, I feel like, or producers, just sort of get music done. Get an idea, get it done, and then sort of flesh it out if there's something there. And I'm trying to get into that sort of operating mindset.
Yeah.
Just keep making new songs.
I really like this section here.
I mean, that's literally a sample of water dripping.
Hmm.
It doesn't get more wet than that. Okay, that flows nicely.
Hmm. This song just reminds me of a clock, which I'm sure is intentional.
Of a clock, you said?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'd say it's a pretty common sort of theme used in electronic music. It's usually quite menacing. Sort of like a countdown towards something. It doesn't feel that way in this case though.
Yeah.
Yeah, the music's been a lot slower the second half of the album. You did
Hmm.
mention that.
It's a really welcome change of pace, I feel.
Yeah, I would disagree, but that's just because I like fast music.
I I hear where you're coming from, and I guess I'll rephrase slightly. I feel
No, no,
like
I'm not saying that you're wrong. Your opinion is your opinion. It's valid.
sure, when I think of fast music, it should I feel like the album should either be balanced with it, which I think this is an example of, or fully commit. Like you can't have one slower song on a very fast album that just kind of throws you for a loop.
I mean, fast and slow are all sort of like constructs in the sense of you can make an album feel anyway, even if it's fast BPM or slow BPM. You can use synths and halftime and double time to sort of, manipulate the sound of an album into how you want it to be. But this album, I think that it specifically takes steps to slow and speed the album up very deliberately, and even like within songs. They're sort of it's not consistent, and some people might appreciate that, some people might not.
That's fair. Very measured response as always.
Yeah. I don't think there's a right or wrong way to do an album, but I do like this sort of build up here. That's what I was thinking. It felt slow, but I still felt like it was in 170 BPM, but just in halftime.
Yeah. And I feel like to some degree it almost lulls you into a sense of security.
A false sense of security or just a sense of security?
I guess a false sense is the word I'm looking for.
Yeah.
You're not, I guess, expecting the build up that you get here.
Yeah. There wasn't really a sort of, because a lot of the time in electronic music, when you're gonna get a build up, there'll be like a synth or two that'll change in the background. Like something will start building up a little before the beat comes in or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
This sort of, it was just the same little loop, and then the beat came in, which I thought was interesting because it's like you said, you didn't really see it coming.
Yeah. I love the bass in this section.
Yeah, it's very enveloping. The filtering and sort of like mastering is very well done. It's very deliberate.
Mm.
I can really tell what they were going for when everything's put together.
The term I feel I like to use for this kind of sound is very driving.
Mm-hmm. You mean like Nightfall, like that kind of driving,
Yeah.
or Night Call? Sorry, I don't like that song. Inside Heart, I forgot the name of it.
Sorry, it is I feel a meme song, but it serves its purpose well.
What time of the song are you at, by the way, just for reference?
I am at 448.
Okay, I just hit 448, so
Okay.
close enough. This is the song "Wing," by the way, for anyone listening. We haven't paused the album, so if you timed with us at the beginning, you shouldn't be off time.
Yeah, I don't know if we've paused at all on this.
No, we haven't. I'm fairly certain of that. That was a very interesting song.
Hmm.
It it was upbeat, it was up tempo, but it was also very measured and slow. It
Yeah.
was very much like it sort of confuses my lizard brain, my lizard drum and bass electronic music brain, because it's like if a song sounds like this, shouldn't it feel like I want to get up and dance? But I don't. I'm sort of in like it's very interesting if that makes sense, because I don't know how to describe it. Just sort of like in limbo of how I feel.
Yeah. If anything, I'd say it kind of tickles the ears.
It does. It does like any good album should.
And then we're getting into the last track, the closing moments here.
Mm. Has the second highest amount of plays of the entire album, besides Collapse Theme.
Mm.
So I have high hopes for this one, because Collapse Theme was pretty good.
Yeah. I think something that definitely contributes to the AI image I get in my head is the use of Vocaloid samples.
Mm-hmm. Chopped up sampling.
Mm.
You loved the Porter Robinson album, didn't you?
I did. I really liked that album.
What similarities do you see within this and that?
Um, the thing that immediately comes to mind is one of my favorite tracks off of Worlds was a Fellow Feeling, which, if I remember rightly, was one of the more controversial songs on the album because it had a very back and forth.
It wasn't a perfect thematic fit, but I liked it.
Yeah. And that, to me, it's the most reminiscent here. But also, I feel just the intricacy and thoughtfulness of the compositions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the sampling. I think there's a lot of similarities in the sampling that they use.
That's true.
Of course, Worlds is like a very like high production value. He got real singers, and it was very, very. There's a lot of work put into it in a sort of more mainstream way. This is
Yeah.
very much that same vein, but in an underground solo producer producing in a bedroom sort of vibe, which I do appreciate that. You know, it's not easy to do it all yourself.
Yeah.
There's just something about this song that it it's it's taking me the wrong way a little. I don't know why.
Hmm.
I feel like it doesn't know what it's trying to do to me. Maybe that there is a clear purpose to this song, um, but I really feel like I'm not the intended audience of this.
Okay. I mean, yeah, not being able to articulate that. And I feel like I've felt that with other songs as well. But I can
On this
definitely
album or on other albums?
other album.
Uh huh.
I do feel like I get where you're coming from, and I feel like this song does feel more confused than other ones off the album.
Yeah. Not confused in a compositional structural way. Confused in a what do you want people to hear way. It just doesn't click to me in that regard.
Yeah.
Because I had high hopes for this song, like I said. I do like this ending bit though.
Mm-hmm.
The part where there isn't a beat, it feels more put together, structured. I like it a little more.
All right. Well, that was Floral Strobe
My False Noise,
by False Noise.
released in 2020.
Yes. Again, it does still just strike me as so alien that I can't help but love it.
I understand where you're coming from. It strikes me as alien too, but not in a good way because I have a sort of more expectation of what I want this genre of music to be. Um, so I'm gonna go ahead and say that I disagree that this album is neurofunk.
Okay.
I mean, if the artist wants to classify it as neurofunk, by all means, it's your music. You categorize it as you wish. But I don't see it.
I was really hoping you'd get into this because when I first heard this, I had to look on Rate Your Music because I'm like, okay, I have no idea what the hell this is, and Rate Your Music has tons of genres I've never heard of before, and so I see neurofunk, and I'm like, okay, cool. And then later down the line, we get to Snake Monastery, which is also neurofunk, and based off of what you had told me about that genre, Snake Monastery sounded a lot more like the description of neurofunk than this did.
Yeah.
And so I also don't really know where this falls. I don't know what to call this.
I would say if there's like a three-pronged Venn diagram here, there's sort of elements of neurofunk. I really heard the elements of neurofunk, at least the inspirations in the first like couple songs, like 1, 2, and 3, Bright Like the Sun, Floral Strobe, and Collapse Theme.
Mm-hmm.
I heard clear influences of people or artists like Noisia, Camo, and Crooked. I heard them very clearly there, and I love those songs because they felt like traditionally more of what I was expecting.
Yeah.
But as the album went on, I didn't feel like there was a overall stylistic theme sort of tying it together. I think the vocal samples were good. The overall warmth of the album, I do like, in concept. But as something that I would listen to, like I don't see this having almost any replay value for me. There weren't really any standout tracks for me personally. Besides, I'd say the second song, Floral Strobe, I really enjoyed that. The disjointed breakbeat, the enveloping bass, the filtering that was done. I really enjoyed that song. But I can't say there were a lot of high points besides that one. It's not a bad listen. Like I didn't have a bad time listening to this album. I took it all in. I took it for what it was. And what it was seemingly wasn't for someone like me, who was expecting something that would stir up more emotion in me in terms of not anger. Anger is a traditional emotion when you think of neurofunk. Like traditionally, like it's meant to be darker, deeper, scarier, angrier. Um, this just felt like it was trying to do too much to do anything in particular.
I can see that. I can definitely see that. In that, yeah, I feel like the thing that might be setting this aside from a 10 for me, because I do really love this album, but I do think it has its flaws, is that I
Mhm.
think at times it is too committed to its aesthetic, in
Yeah.
that, it has that chip tuned adjacent kind of early 2000s computer feel to it. And I feel like that
And just real
limited.
quick on that point, I want to
Mhm.
make a point real quick. Another album that has that very much a similar type of vibe that I submitted and I think you liked was Crystal Castles.
Yes, and I really liked Crystal Castles.
Yeah, that I think that's a way to use chiptune in a sense that it's very, very entertaining and sort of like, yeah, it's poppy, pop electronica, but it's just so catchy and fun, you know? You just can't stop hearing it in your head. I don't know
Yeah.
if I describe this album the same way.
No, but I definitely hear the similarities. Especially,
Mm,
I felt like Crystal Castles was reserved in a way that I don't think this album is. And I know that's a
no,
weird thing to say, but like, the
it doesn't have
aggression.
to be because Crystal Castles is like a major label release. It has to be a little more like appealing to mainstream taste.
Yeah. And I feel like the emotional capacity of this album is limited by their decision to really stick with the sounds in it. And
Mm-hmm.
at the same time, well, I think it's really well balanced between the like first three tracks, which are my favorite off of this album,
Uh-huh. I
with
can agree with you on that easily.
the slower paced songs in the back end, which I feel,
I think
it
as an EP, if we just got the first four tracks, including the second interlude or the first interlude, I guess,
mm-hmm.
if we just got those four as an EP, this would be like a 8 out of 10 for me minimum.
Yeah,
So, but the rest is what kind of lets me down.
and I can definitely see that. I feel like if this were two separate EPs for front and back half,
Yeah,
then
I think it'd be better.
it would. But it just it does what it does, and it does it really well, and I love it for that.
Yeah, that's perfectly valid. I see where you're coming from. I can understand why you would like it, um, because of the way that we sort of approach this kind of music.
Mm-hmm.
It sort of it sort of feels tailor made to someone like you's tastes. Not saying that's a good or bad thing at all. I'm just saying that it's different. And I think a lot of the albums I submitted, as far as like electronic music goes, which is like most of the albums I submitted, I tried to keep it like relatively. I don't want to say mainstream, but also like I don't want to put something too crazy out there that people wouldn't like because it was just too much. Um, or something that you have to really get into it to even like start to like. But this feels like it could be in between, Like I could see someone who's never listened to electronic music before somehow, I don't know how that's possible, like listening to this and enjoying it a lot.
Yeah.
Um if you're really sort of trying to get into the dystopian vibe, like if you're playing, I don't know, something like any sort of there's a million dystopian video games out there, like any of them. You could put this album in the background and it would probably be great. It would probably blend right in. But yeah. Would you agree with that?
I would definitely agree with that. Um, there was something else I was gonna say. I I would describe this, I think, very solidly as a rate your music core album.
Yeah. And I'm not that kind of music enthusiast. Like I'm not full disclosure, I don't really like rate your music. I think it's too pretentious. Like the people who leave reviews on there, I feel like they're up their own ass too much. Which I'm not saying music reviews are a bad thing, obviously. Otherwise, what are you and I doing here?
Mm-hmm.
But you can't get too up your own ass about it, because like you gotta try and see where people are coming from. Like full like I didn't really get a lot of this album, but I'm trying to see where someone would get a lot out of this album. There's different scenarios, different people who would probably get a 10 out of 10 because
Yeah,
they just want a sort of OST for atmospheric something, for a background music, for whatever.
definitely. And I think rate your music core. I think one of the unifying traits of it is that very dense sound where there's
Yeah.
just a ton going on. I feel like they have a very big tendency to overvalue technicality, which
Yeah.
I loved. I love very technical and dense music, but I feel like, there's more to it, and you need to apply that technicality. You need to earn it a little bit.
Yeah. And also, if you're gonna be super technical, you gotta have something like that's really unique about your sound that catches people and draws them in. I'm not sure there's anything particularly unique about what I heard in this album. Um, like the way it's put together is definitely unique, but as far as the sounds go, like I've heard them before. It's nothing that I haven't. It's nothing groundbreaking, I would say. What do you think?
Um, it wouldn't surprise me that there is, these sounds have been used before. This kind of palette has been done, but it was, when I listened to it, new to me, and it still is very fresh to me. I would be really interested to get some recommendations of things that incorporate this kind of style.
Uh huh. Yeah, yeah. I'll look into it.
And I will say, you saying that like the first three tracks reminded you of Camo and Crooked. I remember
Uh huh.
listening to Camo and Crooked and not being super impressed by it. So I
Yeah.
might need to go back and try again. Kind of listen more closely.
Well, it's not nearly as crazy. I mean, it's very Camel and Crooked is their style of drum and bass is stripped back. It's a sort of less is more is their sort of their operating statement, I would say. Um, the album that I submitted was Zeitgeist, and that was like their sort of real mainstream debut. I'd probably recommend listening to their album after that. That's called Mosaic. It's even more sort of like emotionally charged, I would say, and minimalistic in some ways. You might appreciate that more, judging by how you felt about this album. And one thing about Camo and Cricket is, like, their sounds are unique. Like, their sound design, like, you're probably not going to hear them in other circumstances. Um, it's not really influenced by anything besides themselves. Like, them. I mean, there's obviously influences, but it's very forward thinking in that way. I wouldn't call this album forward thinking.
Okay.
It's a little more. It's taking the past and putting it into a present context, is how I describe Floral Strobe, which is fine. There's plenty of albums that do that and do it really well. I just think that the blending of those in this context didn't really do it for me because there wasn't enough uniqueness and just driving moments. The high moments, they were there, but they weren't really high enough for me to really sort of get my energy up. They were always sort of balanced out by the soft synthesizers or the sparse breakbeat. It never really committed to being like going hard, besides like maybe the second and third song. What do you
Okay.
think about that?
Um. Yeah, I would agree. I think that I would have preferred a little more chaos and a little more energy, especially in the back half of the album.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe like throw one more song like the opener in the back half just to kind of bring the levels up a little bit more.
Yeah. And
But
something that I try to imagine when I listen to like an electronic album like this, like right now I'm wearing like in-ear monitors. Like there's not a ton of bass,
mm,
but I'm trying to imagine it in like a club or like over in my living room with the subwoofer and everything going. Like how would this album make me want to get up and dance? And I'm not sure that it would. I'm not sure that there's enough there for me to really, you know, groove along to it
that
in a
is
literal
fair.
sense, not this sense. But
No, I hear you, and I certainly think that there's much better albums to groove along to.
yeah, if you're trying to dance, yeah.
Well, I think that's about all I gotta say.
No, pretty much. I guess I'll go for my rating for this album. Um, I think there's good parts. I think going for what it does a good job. It just wasn't exactly for me, but technically, very solid album. I can appreciate the technicality. So I was gonna give it a 6, but because of just the quality of how it's produced, I'll give it a 6.5.
Very valid. I still have a very soft spot in my heart for it, so it is still a 9.5 out of 10 for me.
Yeah, and that's totally fine. I can see why you'd give it that, and it's totally understandable.
Yeah. All right. Well, I will see you around.
All right. Thanks for listening, everyone. If you made it to this point, I don't know how you did, but
Like
respect.
and subscribe.
You're a real one.
All right.